Okay, today I'm going to talk about organized crime in the United States. Let's get started. Organized crime as a whole can be traced all the way back to the early 1800s, where street gangs terrorized cities and towns looking for power as well as illegal financial gain. In the 1800s, organized crime and street gangs were seen as a way to gain protection from other rival gangs and the corrupt police officers that were running rampant at the time. Although the start of organized crime has been around from as early as the 1800s, the beginning of organized crime in the United States is only dated back to the 1920s, which is less than 100 years ago. The United States organized crime ring started with the American Mafia and the Italian American Mafia. According to a journal on the American Mafia and Prohibition, the American Mafia rose to power in the 1920s due to Prohibition and the mass immigration into the United States from Italy. Prohibition can be defined as prevention by law of crafting and selling something that, in this case, was alcohol. Prohibition may have been a gateway that started up organized crime and black markets. I say this because making alcohol illegal just makes people want to pursue it more, meaning that it leaves the door wide open for illegal trading and consumption of the illicit beverages. Prohibition in the United States between 1920 and 1930 is believed to be a misguided and failed social experiment that alcohol worsen by encouraging drinkers to switch to spirits and created a large black market for alcohol supplied by organized crime. Now back to the task at hand, organized crime in the United States. In the United States, the Americans took on a slightly different approach to organized crime, which included being a type of businessman, if you will. This type of approach to organized crime is called being a robber baron. Robber barons are people who became rich and made financial gains through any means necessary. The difference between robber barons, organized crime groups in the 1920s and the early 1800s is that those groups were a lot more business these groups were a lot more business savvy than back then. The first robber baron I will mention in this paper is John Jacob Astor. John Astor made his rise to wealth by alcohol and the American fur trade. What makes most robber barons phenomenal is that a vast majority of them came from very poor families and turned everything around by becoming self-made millionaires. Astor is no exception to this. John Astor used fraud and violence to reach the top of the food chain. He made a business and took down anyone who came in who went against him, and in the end, no one could stop him, and he died one of the richest men in America. The next robber baron to be mentioned is Cornelius Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt was also a story of one starting off very poor and becoming very rich, like many other robber barons of the era, but Vanderbilt knew more about the business side of things, seeing as he had to get into that type of lifestyle as a teenager. Vanderbilt is seen as a bad man by many that hear his name today, but according to Grant, Vanderbilt could be a rascal, combative, and cunning, but he was much more of a builder than a wrecker, and he also possessed other admirable traits, including being honorable, shrewd, and hardworking. Unlike John Astor, Vanderbilt was on the shipping and railroad side of things. Vanderbilt also was able to get governments on his side, making him a force to be reckoned with. The last example of robber barons would be John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller was one of the few robber barons that didn't grow up very poor, but in a rather middle-class lifestyle. Rockefeller, like Vanderbilt, got into the working man's lifestyle at a young age of 16. Rockefeller was a very smart man and ended up getting into the oil business, and that is where things began to get a little violent. Rockefeller was able to team up with Vanderbilt at some point and cut off railways as to eliminate other competitors, making them pay ridiculous prices even go as far as to use physical violence. From the examples of robber barons given, there are a few things that stick out. The first thing is that all of these men are very good businessmen and very intelligent beings to be able to bring themselves to riches how they did. The last thing is that these men were willing to do any and everything to get what they wanted, whether it be legal or illegal. They got what they wanted by any means necessary. Having this thought process paved the way for American organized crime because it showed that anything is possible if you put your mind to it. It showed poor young kids that there is a way out. It may not be a good, honest living, but there is a way out. You just have to find it. Now I'll talk about the American Mafia and the Italian American Mafia and their influences on organized crime. American and Italian mafias are primarily located in New York and Chicago and are more than just railroads and moving oil. The American Mafia and the Italian Mafia were based more around politics. These two mafias struck fear into any and everyone who got in their way and did not exclude the government. Although the American and Italian mafias have the same end goal, the two mafias had a few differences. Starting with the Italian mafia, the obvious difference between it and the American mafia is that it is almost completely made up of immigrants. Bringing what they knew from their previous country, the Italian American mafia began to find other means to make a good living due to the fact that they were facing enormous social and economic hardships exacerbated by nativism. The American mafia, on the other hand, differs from the Italian American mafia because they are more diverse, having a wide variety of ethnicities integrated into their criminal organization. The American mafia also has their hands in more things that not only include gambling, prostitution, and the drug trade, but also include highly important things such as politics and elections. The sheer magnitude of these organizations and how much power they have is mind-boggling. All in all, organized crime is in the United States still exists, and with such things as mentioned before, like gambling, prostitution, and the drug trade. People like Ashton, Vanderbilt, and Rockefeller paved the way for organized crime to flourish into what it is today by showing that you do not have to be wealthy from the start, and that as long as you're willing to try, there is always a way to make something happen.